Something happened to me, and I need to get it off my chest before I go crazy. If you're listening to this now, please believe every word. I gain nothing from making things up. In fact, I desperately wish it had all been just a dream. It was shortly after midnight when my shift began. Tuesday morning, usually the calmest, emptiest, quietest day. I've always hated that silence. It leaves too much room to think, to remember, to feel that strange weight in my chest that I've never been able to explain. But that night, there was something different. A chill that didn't match the air conditioning. A feeling that the lights were taking half a second longer to turn on when I walked by. Something like a delay, as if the store was breathing. I tried to ignore it. I tried to do what I always do. Check inventory, organize some pallets, review the aisles. That's when I found Evan near the warehouse. He was pale, sweaty, staring at the gondolas as if he'd seen someone standing there, someone who shouldn't be there. "Did you see that?" he asked without taking his eyes off the hallway. I asked, "That what?" Trying to keep my voice steady. He took a deep breath, trembling. "A person. I think someone went in there." But it was strange. Very strange. I tried to laugh to lighten the mood, but it didn't come naturally. The truth is, I'd been feeling the same way since I arrived. Like there was someone between the shelves, quiet, watching. We each went our separate ways. I was put in charge of aisles 10 through 14. And I soon realized that something was wrong with the air there. Colder. Denser. It looked as if someone had passed by seconds before, leaving an invisible trail. While I was adjusting some boxes at the end of the hallway, I heard a dry sound behind me. Like something had fallen to the floor, or been dragged. I turned around. Nothing, just the hallway. Long, empty. Too dark in the final part, as if the light were dying. Evan rushed past me again. He said he was going to check that thing in hallway 14. He'd heard a noise coming from there. I thought it was strange, but I let him go. I needed to finish my part. But as the minutes ticked by, that unpleasant feeling intensified. The silence became too profound that I felt my ears being pressed against me, like when you go into a tunnel, and suddenly the whole store seemed to wait. It's the only word I can use. It was at that moment that I realized Evan hadn't returned. And for some reason that I still try to ignore to this day, the cold air in the store seemed to concentrate right behind me, as if something had approached and stopped there. I wanted to leave right then and there. I should have left. But that was only the beginning. After waiting a few minutes for Evan to return, my discomfort turned into genuine worry. He wasn't the type to disappear without a word. He was always methodical, almost irritatingly meticulous about his work. So, when I noticed that almost 10 minutes had passed since he went to check on the noise, I decided to go to the monitoring room. The room was behind the reception desk, separated by a heavy door that always made a metallic click when it closed. When I pushed the door that night, it felt too light. As if someone had left it ajar, but I perfectly remembered hearing Evan close it when he passed by earlier. I turned on the main monitor. The image took longer than usual to stabilize. The camera seemed to be experiencing minor interference, like static waves running along the edges of the screen. I went through the images one by one, looking for the reflection of Evan's jacket. Nothing in aisle 10. Nothing in 11, 12, 13. When I arrived at corridor 14, the image shook. I thought it was a glitch, but then, it appeared. A crooked sign, slightly tilted to the right, 14B. 14B? That simply didn't exist. I knew every inch of that store. Every aisle, every door, every stock entrance. There was no B in any of the corridors. There never was. I enlarged the image. The footage was dark, grainy, as if the camera were an older model. That's when I saw him. Evan. Walking slowly, following a silhouette standing at the end of the corridor. The silhouette was small, perhaps the size of a child, but the way it lay there, motionless, without waving its arms, without tilting its head, it looked like a statue placed in the wrong place. Or worse, it seemed like she was waiting for him. Evan was saying something, but the camera didn't pick up any audio. His mouth moved quickly as if he were calling someone, asking them to wait. The silhouette didn't move. The image suddenly darkened, and for a second I thought I had lost signal. But no. The camera was working. It was the corridor, as if it had become deeper, longer, as if it had gained meters that shouldn't exist. The silhouette began to move into the shadow. Not walking. More like sliding, steps without leg movement. Evan followed her. I felt my stomach sink that I almost felt nauseous. Something inside me screamed at me not to go after him, but another part, stronger, heavier, said I needed to. I couldn't leave Evan there. Whatever that place was, whatever it might have been. Before leaving the room, I checked the store map pinned to the wall. Just to confirm. Just to make sure I wasn't going crazy. Corridor 14. Cleaning, household utensils, storage. Corridor 15. Gardening.no 14B. No space between them. No subdivision. But on camera, he was there. Real, wrong, dark, waiting. I took a deep breath and turned off the lights in the monitoring room. The back hallway seemed quieter than it should have been, and for a moment I swear I heard shuffling footsteps, slow, scratching the ceramic floor, right outside the door. Those weren't Evan's footsteps. I left the monitoring room with my heart pounding so hard I could feel my pulse in my fingertips. The air there felt heavier, as if the store itself had become smaller, compressed, as if I were entering a space that didn't want to receive me. I called for Evan. Nothing. Corridor 12 was completely quiet, but each step I took echoed as if inside a tunnel, a strange, lingering, almost wet echo. The light above me flickered twice as I passed. It wasn't the first time it had happened, but that night, the interval between one flicker and the other was far too long. As if someone had held the switch up there. As I turned into aisle 13, I felt such a strong chill that my shoulders trembled. The air turned icy behind my neck, and for a moment I was absolutely certain that someone was standing right next to my neck. I didn't want to look. Not immediately. I just took a deep breath, trying to appear rational. When I finally turned my head, there was nothing there. Nothing but an empty hallway, but the air was still cold, as if that presence had just retreated into the shadows. I called again, "Evan?" My voice came out low and hoarse. That's when I heard it, just a few meters from me, Evan's voice answering, "I'm here." But something was wrong, very wrong. The voice sounded like his, but it didn't have the same cadence. It was more drawn out, as if the words were being repeated by someone who had never used their mouth before. An imitated sound. Unnatural. I followed the sound, guided by a mixture of fear and despair. My hands were sweaty. My chest began to ache as if I were short of breath. That's when I reached the end of corridor 14. And I saw it. The sign. 14B. She was simply there, hanging crookedly, held in place by screws that weren't there the night before. The strangest thing is that the edges of the plate had a darker tone, as if they were burned, or aged. The painting looked old, unlike all the other signs in the store. I couldn't recall any corridors at that point. There was never any space there, it was just a blank wall. But now, there was a narrow, long, poorly lit corridor, and the air coming out of it was so cold that the skin on my arm instantly crawled. I took a step forward. The floor of 14B was different. Rougher, like the old flooring of a building that no longer existed. And then, the sound came. A low, almost inaudible sound. Like someone breathing between the gondolas. Or perhaps, whispering. "Evan?" I called again, already regretting my courage. This time the answer came from behind me. "It doesn't come in." The voice was so close that I felt the warm air touch my ear, but when I turned around, there was no one there. However, corridor 14B seemed to be watching me. I don't know how to explain it, but I felt that he was waiting for me. As if he had appeared there just for me. As if he knew I would come in, even unintentionally. My whole body was trembling as I took another step. The light flickered, and for a second I saw a shadow move in the distance, too tall to be Evan, but too short for an average adult. Something was there, something that was always at the edge of my field of vision. I should have run away. I know I should. But at that moment, it seemed too late. I entered aisle 14B slowly, like someone stepping into a place where they shouldn't be, and perhaps that was exactly it. Crossing the line of gondolas was enough to realize that this space didn't follow the same rules as the rest of the store. The shelves were taller. Much taller. They were so tall that I couldn't see where they ended. They were made of dark, old metal, with deep scratches as if something had been dragged across them for years. The corridor was too narrow, almost claustrophobic, and the air smelled of old dust, rust, and something metallic. A smell I know well, dried blood. I took a few more steps. The ground seemed to absorb the sound of my footsteps. It was like walking on something hollow but at the same time, alive. With each step, I felt a slight, almost imperceptible vibration as if the floor were breathing too slowly. That's when I saw something on the ground, a faint glint reflecting from the flickering light above me that I crouched down. It was Evan's name tag. Party.as if it had been crushed. My chest tightened violently that I tried calling him again, but my voice came out low, almost non-existent. Evan, please, answer. Silence. The light flickered, and in the brief instant when the corridor became completely dark, I heard a whisper behind the nearest gondola, irregular breathing, that a slow dragging motion, like fingernails scraping against metal. I froze. But the worst part wasn't the sound. It was realizing that someone was watching me from above. I didn't see it directly, just the subtle movement in the corner of my eye, as if something were hanging from the top of the shelf, following me as I walked. And when I raised my head, the light flickered again, revealing, for half a second, a humanoid outline curved in the shadows. Evan? No, that was longer, more crooked. His arms were too long, as if they didn't have joints where they should. The light returned to normal, and the figure vanished, as if I had never been there. My whole body tingled, his breathing became short that I wanted to run, but my legs wouldn't respond. I kept walking with the feeling that the corridor was getting narrower with each step. I looked back. The entrance to 14B seemed farther away than it should have been, darker. And then I heard it. A voice behind me. I shouldn't have followed her. The voice belonged to Evan, but weak. Trembling. As if speaking through water. I turned around quickly, and the light went out completely. Total darkness. Absolute. In the dark, I felt something touch my shoulder. A touch too cold to be human. Cold as metal. Slow, heavy, as if it were recognizing me by touch. I don't know how long I stood there, sweating, trembling, feeling that touch slowly slide along my collarbone. Then out of nowhere, the hallway lit up again. And Evan wasn't there. The touch disappeared, the feeling disappeared. But something at the end of the corridor moved, a fleeting, small figure turning right. Without thinking, I ran to the spot where I saw him. The corridor was now turning. That was impossible. 14B could never have a curve. It physically wouldn't fit within the store's structure. But there, it was as if the space had folded in on itself. At the end of the curve, I found only more shelves. Empty. No sign of Evan. No way out. The silence weighed heavily, before a loud crack echoed behind me, like a bone breaking. I turned around, and I only saw the end of the corridor, empty. But for a few seconds the light cast a shadow that didn't match the shape of any gondola. She was crouching down. As if that were expected. As if he knew I would get there. When I blinked, it disappeared. All that remained was the feeling that something was very close. Too close. It accompanied me as long as I breathed. I don't remember how I got out of hallway 14B. Serious.my memory simply fails me. All I have are flashes, the sound of something running between the gondolas, the sensation of cold hands pushing my shoulder, a red light flashing in the background, as if the store had a hidden alarm I'd never seen before. When I came to, I was sitting near the entrance, my back against the automatic door, breathing rapidly, my chest burning as if I had run a marathon. Evan wasn't there. Corridor 14B is also not an option. The sky was beginning to lighten outside. The first employee of the morning shift arrived about 15 minutes later, finding me sweaty, pale, clutching Evan's broken name tag as if it were the only thing keeping me anchored to reality. He asked me what had happened. I tried to explain. The words came out jumbled together, disconnected. Hallway doesn't exist. Evan disappeared. Someone inside. Camera, crooked license plate, flickering light. With each sentence his expression grew more closed off, more suspicious. They called the manager. He led me to the monitoring room, trying to remain calm, but the way he held the walkie-talkie betrayed his silent fear of a major problem. A missing employee, a possible accident, an internal audit. When we got to the room, I asked him to open the recording from the camera in hallway 14. He clicked without questioning. Filming has begun. And it was only then that I felt something inside me break. I appeared walking alone, throughout all the hallways, calling for someone who wasn't there, talking to the void. "Where's Evan?" I asked, desperately. The manager paused the video and stared at me with a look that was a mixture of concern and irritation. "Dude, Evan didn't even come to work today. He texted earlier saying he was sick. Are you okay?" No, I wasn't. I begged him to go back a few hours in the recordings, to show the moment when Evan arrived. He's back. And Evan wasn't there. There is no record of his entry. No image of him passing through the door, no reflection, nothing. It was as if he had never been in the store. As if I had imagined it all. The manager asked me to take a break, suggesting that I was under extreme stress and needed a few days off. I wanted to argue. I wanted to prove that I wasn't crazy. Before leaving the room, however, I noticed that one of the files was duplicated, as if there were a parallel recording, a mirrored version. He shouldn't have been there. No one records the same time slot twice. When the manager turned to answer the radio, I connected my cell phone and downloaded that quick, hidden file, just to be safe, just to have something real with me. I was sent home that day. I received a suspension until the company understood what happened. I arrived at my apartment trembling. I took a shower, but the hot water didn't wash away the feeling of cold hands still imprinted on my skin. It took me hours to muster the courage to open the duplicate video. But when I opened it, the recording started as usual. Me walking alone. Distorted voice from the ventilation system. Everything's normal. Until, in the second minute, something has changed. A silhouette appeared behind one of the shelves. Short girl. Curved. Property. The camera froze for half a second before returning, and then, there was Evan. Standing at the end of the hallway, pale, eyes wide open, shining as if reflecting a non-existent light. Her mouth was slightly open at an impossible angle. The image froze, and, at the same instant, the audio, supposedly non-existent, it activated on its own. A drawn-out, distorted voice like metal scratching glass whispered, "You're next." The video was taken down. My phone turned off. To this day, I haven't been able to turn it on again. And since that night, I feel it, when I'm home alone, when I turn off the lights, when midnight strikes. I feel like someone is behind my bedroom door, waiting for the right time to go in. I know I shouldn't go back to that store, but I think, it doesn't matter. The thing that came out of hallway 14B, he's already found me. Something happened to me, and to this day I can't explain it. I worked the night shift at that store for almost 2 years, and I had never seen anything like it. And no matter how hard I try to move on with my life, sleep, forget, every time I close my eyes I remember it standing between the shelves, staring into nowhere. Or maybe, staring at me. I didn't want to be there that night. I was already at my breaking point, weeks without proper sleep, anxiety tightening my chest, that constant feeling that I was going to faint at any moment. But I needed the job. I needed the paycheck. So I walked in through the employee entrance, taking a deep breath, trying to convince myself that it would just be another quiet shift. The store was so quiet it seemed abandoned. The fluorescent lights made that low, irritating hum, and the hallway leading to the security room was colder than usual. I always found that place uncomfortable, but that night, it felt like something was watching me from the ceiling, or from the dark corners between the shelves. I sat in front of the monitor panel, trying to ignore the weight on my shoulders and the slight trembling in my hands. The images were normal. Empty aisles, neatly lined shelves, the static glow of the cameras. No customers had entered since the store closed at 11 p.m. I knew this because the system automatically registers each time the main door opens. And it was 0. But when I blinked, I swear it was only for a second, there was someone on camera 3. A silhouette standing in the cleaning corridor. Motionless. Too dark to be an employee. Too tall too. The kind of thing you only notice when you really look at the screen, as if it had been there all along, waiting to be noticed. I watched that with my heart racing. I clicked to zoom in. The image became slightly distorted, grainy, but the figure remained there. So, faceless, shapeless, Something small inside me begged me not to blink again, as if blinking would be enough to lose sight of it, or for it to move. And for a moment I tried to convince myself that it was just someone who came in before the store closed. A distracted customer. An employee from another shift. Anything that made sense. But the door hadn't registered anything. Nothing. When I switched to camera 4 just to see another angle of that hallway, the figure was no longer there. It disappeared as if it had never existed. I felt cold sweat trickle down the back of my neck, and for the first time that night I seriously considered getting up and leaving. But I stayed because I didn't know yet that this was just the beginning. I should have left that night. I know that now. I couldn't stop thinking about that silhouette. Even trying to convince myself it was just a transmission error, I knew. You knew that something had entered the store without actually going in. The following hours only made things worse. It was almost 2 in the morning when the first strange thing happened. A dry crackling sound echoed through the ceiling of the security room. Too loud to be just the air conditioning. The sound reverberated through the corridors as if something had walked above the light fixtures, dragging weight, scratching the metal. I held my breath, waiting for the noise to return, and he returned, closer. I jumped out of my chair and adjusted the camera panel. That's when I saw another figure. Camera 7. Gardening sector. A slender, hunched silhouette walked slowly between the shelves. The lights flickered as she passed, as if something were draining the energy from the room, and again, no record of an open door. No authorized entry. It was impossible. I switched to camera 8. The figure was further ahead, almost at the end of the corridor. I switched to 9. Now she was facing the camera, as if she had known that I would change to that angle. The sensation that rose through my body didn't feel like ordinary fear. It was a concentrated cold, as if my blood had stopped for a second. My hands began to sweat, and I felt my breathing become short, shaky, and irregular. I called my supervisor on the radio. "Could you come here and do something? There's someone walking around the store and..." "No one came in," he interrupted me, his voice dry. "I just checked." He arrived a few minutes later, annoyed, probably thinking I was imagining things because I was tired. But when he looked at the screen, his expression changed instantly. The silhouette was standing still, completely motionless, facing the camera. Even with the low resolution, there was something profoundly wrong with that posture. As if the body were slightly crooked, displaced, made of parts that didn't fit together properly. My supervisor swallowed hard. Is this someone from the cleaning staff?" He tried to sound rational. "There's no cleaning staff here tonight," I replied. He moved closer to the screen, his face almost touching the monitor. That's when the figure tilted its head to the right. Slowly, mechanically. As if he were listening to us. My supervisor took a step back. I felt my stomach churn. I switched to another camera. She had disappeared. "That doesn't make sense," he muttered. "I'll go over there and see." He hurried out into the hallway, the sound of his footsteps echoing through the empty building. As I watched the cameras, I tried to locate the figure again. Any shadow, any movement. Nothing. But, a few minutes later, when I adjusted to camera 10, there was a blur at the end of the corridor. A shape moving slowly, almost gliding, and that was exactly the corridor where my supervisor had gone. I called your name over the radio. No response. The image remained grainy for 3 long seconds. When it stabilized, the figure was closer to the camera. And then, right at the edge of the radio's audio, I heard a sound that chilled me to the bone. Shuffling steps, very slow, very human. And they weren't coming through the cameras. They were coming down the hallway behind me. The steps continued, dragging, uneven, as if something were testing the weight of their own bodies. I turned slowly, my heart pounding in my neck, and the hallway was empty. Nothing. Only the mechanical silence of the lights buzzing above me. But on camera, that's not what appeared. I returned to the table almost tripping, my hand trembling so much that it took me 3 tries to click the panel. Camera 10 still showed that silhouette, but now she was closer. Her body seemed to distort the image around her, as if the air were heavy, too thick, and behind her, right at the end of the corridor, there was something else. A small, minimal movement, as if another figure were there, just an outline, almost imperceptible. My throat went dry. I called my supervisor again on the radio. Can you hear me? Or are you just static? A hissing sound that seemed like breathing. I went back to the camera in the area where he should have been. There was no one there. No sign of him. None. My chest began to ache from being so tight. The feeling that I was alone in that store, truly alone, hit me like a blow. But then something happened that made my stomach drop. Camera 2. The hallway where I was standing seconds before. In the center of the image, an identical figure to the one we saw before. Property. Facing the direction of the security room. I felt a chill run up my spine, followed by something so instinctive that I almost fell out of my chair. The figure on camera was exactly the same distance away as the footsteps behind me appeared to be. I pressed the quick return button. The camera shook. The figure tilted its head, slowly, absurdly slowly, and the movement was identical to that of the first silhouette in the gardening section. As if it were the same. Someone, or the same thing. The same presence repeated in different places. The light in my hallway flickered 3 times. 3 dry snaps. Tack, tack, AC. My heart almost stopped. I didn't want to look back, but I also couldn't just stay with the cameras. I held my breath and turned my face a few millimeters. Nothing. The hallway remained empty, but I swear on everything that, for a second, I felt the air behind me lose temperature. Drop about 5-6 degrees, the kind of cold you feel only on the back of your neck, as if someone were breathing there so close they could touch your hair. I squeezed my eyes shut, trying not to cry. I tried to rationalize it. I'm tired. It's just sleepiness. It's just anxiety. But then, something bumped against the glass door of the security room. A gentle pressure. Deliberate. Like a hand testing if the door was open. I looked at the security camera footage, the one that shows the hallway itself from the outside. And there it was. The figure, stopped right in front of the door with the head tilted to the right, same as the other one. Same as the others. But that wasn't the worst part. The worst part is that the glass in the door was completely clean, and the figure had no reflection. My radio started crackling again. This time, an almost inaudible voice whispered something that sent chills down my spine. I shouldn't have stayed here. That's when I realized, they knew exactly where I was. And they were getting closer. The figure in front of the door didn't move, but I could feel, as if something was vibrating within her, a silent tension, caught between entering or waiting. The glass felt too cold, as if it had ice inside. I shrank back in my chair, trying to stay as still as possible, like an animal trying not to attract the attention of a predator. I switched to the side corridor camera. Another figure walked slowly, almost dragging their right foot, their legs stiff as if their body wasn't made for that posture. And she was coming towards the security room. My breathing began to falter. The sound of my own heartbeat was so loud it seemed to echo throughout the room. I tried to think of something rational, anything, an intruder, a prank, a system malfunction. But everything crumbled when I saw those shapes moving without logic, without weight, without human intent. The figure at the door tilted its head to the left now. Slowly, and something about the movement gave me a terrible certainty. They were listening to me. The living room light flickered. Once. 2. In the third one, the monitor next to my arm displayed interference. A black wave crossing the image as if something had passed very close to the lens. I switched cameras again. Electronics aisle. A third figure standing in front of a switched-off TV, as if observing its reflection. And in her reflection, there was something behind her. A second outline. Something creepy. Something the actual hallway didn't show. I swallowed hard and went back to the door camera. The figure had disappeared. My whole body froze. I looked around at the glass at the corner of the room. Nothing. Nothing. Until you hear the sound. Tack. Like fingernails touching metal. The door latch moved. Gently. Then stronger, as if an inexperienced hand were trying to understand the mechanism. I backed up until my back hit the wall. The radio hissed, almost blowing the speaker. A dense, heavy static, and in the middle of it, take a deep breath. Slow. The kind you only hear when someone is right next to your ear. Skirt? Murmured the voice. She didn't look human. It had a broken rhythm, as if it were assembled from scraps of sound. The latch stopped. Absolute silence. I went back to the hallway camera. The figure was there. Not at the door. No further away. But exactly next to the glass in the room, a few centimeters from the lens. As if he had pressed his face against mine to watch me. The glass showed no reflection whatsoever. Only a dark and shapeless image like a shadow mold. I felt something behind me. A minimal displacement of air. A biting chill that shot up from his lower back to his neck. My body reacted before my mind. I turned around in sheer despair. The room was empty. Completely empty. But I swear, for a second I saw the chair behind me rocking on its own. It was as if someone had gotten up from it at the exact moment I turned around. That's when I finally understood. They weren't trying to break in, they were waiting for me to leave. I don't remember exactly how long I stayed huddled against the wall, breathing as if I'd run miles. Maybe minutes. Maybe hours. Time in there began to behave strangely. As if each second stretched, creaking, about to break in half. When I finally managed to move, my legs were shaking so much I almost fell. The figure in the camera, the one stuck to the glass, had disappeared again, and that was even worse than seeing her. I stumbled to the table and pulled the keyboard toward me. I needed to find my supervisor. I needed to understand if I was alone there, or if he too was trapped in the same nightmare. I rewound the recordings from the last 20 minutes. The first thing I noticed was the sound. A low, constant hiss like wind passing through an empty tunnel. This never appeared in the internal recordings. Never. I moved forward a few seconds, and then I saw. In the camera on corridor 10, the one he had gone to, my supervisor appears walking, but with uncertain, slow steps as if he were dizzy. He looks around, calls my name, and the image shakes as if the lens were vibrating. Behind him, one of the figures stands out from the shadow. I am here. Weightless. As if she didn't exist until the exact moment she decides to be seen. I pressed pause. The air left my lungs. The figure was just a few meters away from him, and he didn't react. It didn't work. He didn't feel it. I went back a few seconds to check if she had already been there. It wasn't. She simply appeared. I resumed the video. My supervisor takes 2 more steps, and then the recording cuts off for less than a second. A single glitch like an electronic blink. When the image returns, he's no longer in the hallway. It disappeared. I am here. No fall. No fight. Nothing. Only the figure remained, standing in the same place where he had been with head tilted, listening. I pushed the chair back so fast that my back hit the wall. My whole body was trembling. My hands were so cold I could barely touch the keyboard. I wanted to leave right then and there. I wanted to run, break down the door, scream for help. But before I could get up, something caught my eye on the central monitor. Security room camera. You, sitting in the chair, breathing fast, looking at the screens. But, in the upper corner of the recording, had something behind me. A silhouette squeezed into the corner of the room as if it were nestled into the wall. Cake. Quiet, observing. My heart almost stopped. I turned around instantly. Nothing was there. Nothing. But on the recording, in the video that kept playing, the thing moved closer to my chair. Slowly, with movements that seemed to be made of cut-out pieces, as if her body were a software error trying to imitate the human form. I paused again. My throat tightened. I knew that what I was seeing wasn't possible. It couldn't be real. But then I realized something that made my stomach drop. The figures did not appear when the store was open. They didn't appear when there were customers. Not even employees. They only appeared when the store was locked, empty. Just me in there. I fast-forwarded the video from the previous hours, and I found more. 4 figures wandering the corridors at 10:58 p.m. The store was still closed. Nobody had opened the door. They were already inside. Before anyone arrives for their shift. I took a deep breath. A devastating feeling washed over me, an almost physical, paralyzing weight. The store was never empty. We just thought it would stay that way. I closed the monitor, too afraid to watch the rest of the recordings. I didn't want to know what happened when the lights went out completely. And if you've listened this far, comment. I heard the whispers. Something happened to me, and so far I haven't found a way to explain it without sounding like I've completely lost my mind. But I need to talk. I need to get this off my chest before the silence makes things worse. I've been working the graveyard shift at a Walmart for almost 2 years. I always thought the worst thing about it was the boredom, the overly bright lights, the constant sound of the air conditioning, and that smell of plastic mixed with old dust. But that night, something was wrong from the start. I was restocking the toy section as I always do on Tuesdays. The aisle was empty, too bright in some places and too dark in others, as if the lamps were trapped between two worlds. The dolls, lined up in endless rows, seemed to watch me with those glass eyes that reflect too much light. The sound of my own hands tearing open boxes seemed too loud in that silence, dry, harsh, echoing between the shelves. With each movement, I felt the air growing colder, as if an invisible door had been opened to some place that shouldn't exist. That's when I saw her for the first time. A woman, standing right in the center of the row of dolls. Her back to the camera. Completely still. She wasn't trembling, she wasn't breathing, she didn't even make the slightest sign of life. She seemed placed there, like part of the shelf, as if she were just another object. My heart started pounding so hard it made me nauseous. I tried to clear my throat to call out to her, but the sound that came out was a broken whisper. I swallowed hard, took a step forward, and in that exact movement, all the lights above me flickered as if something had passed through them. I blinked, she disappeared. I didn't hear footsteps. I didn't hear running. I didn't hear anything. Just emptiness. The hallway in front of me was completely clean, quiet, normal. But normality at that moment seemed even more threatening. I felt a sharp chill on the back of my neck, so cold it made my whole body freeze. The sensation was clear, uncomfortable, almost painful. Someone was behind me. I turned slowly, my stomach churning, expecting to see the woman there, just inches from my face, but there was no one there. Only the muffled sound of the air conditioner, but now it seemed different, heavier, like a sigh that was too long. I ran to the security room. I asked the supervisor to look at the hallway cameras. She checked the footage hurriedly, already annoyed by my insistence on this so many times during previous shifts. And then she said, without looking at me, "There's nobody there. Just you." Something inside me broke. I knew what I had seen. I knew. But the screens only showed me alone, standing still, staring into the void. Before heading back into the hallway, I stood by the door, taking a deep breath, trying to gather my courage. And it was there, in that absolute silence, that I felt it again, eyes watching me from between the shelves, too far away to see, too close to ignore. I tried to forget what I had seen that night, but the problem is that Walmart in the early morning hours doesn't let you forget anything. The empty aisles become mirrors of what's going on inside your head. And the more I tried to convince myself that I had imagined that woman, the stronger the feeling of being watched returned. 2 days later, while we were drinking cold coffee in the break room, Marcos, one of the only employees who could still handle the night shift, said something that made my stomach sink. "Dude, have you ever seen a woman standing in the doll section? Right in the middle of the aisle?" He asked, trying to sound casual but failing. I felt my hands go cold. "What do you mean?" I tried to keep my voice steady. He glanced at the door of the room as if afraid that someone might be listening. Always at 3 in the morning. Always standing still, motionless. With her back turned. I've never seen her move. When I get closer, she's simply not there anymore. My heart was pounding so hard that I noticed my breath catching for a second. "And have you checked the cameras?" I asked. Marcos let out a nervous little laugh. "That's the worst part. She never appears in the recordings. Never. It's like we're seeing things." That destroyed me inside. The word "seeing something," it stuck in my head like poison. We were both describing the same scene, the same time, the same behavior. It wasn't a coincidence. It couldn't be. That night, I went back to the toy section early. The lights had that cold, old bulb glow, reflecting off the plastic of the dolls like tiny, moist eyes. I walked slowly, feeling the floor creak beneath my sneakers as if the store breathed with me. That's when I heard a sound that shouldn't exist. One clue slow, plastic scraping against plastic coming from the back of the aisle. As if one of the packages was being moved, but nobody else was there. My whole body froze. The sound repeated, louder, more determined. I tried to rationalize. Maybe it was the air conditioning. Maybe it was a poorly positioned box. Maybe it was anything that didn't involve that woman. But then, something fell. A doll, One of those with oversized eyes, tumbled off the shelf right in front of me. It didn't roll. It didn't bounce. It just fell as if someone had pushed it. I slowly bent down to pick it up, and when I touched the cold plastic I felt something I couldn't explain. One breath, weak, behind me, hot enough to make every hair on the back of my neck stand on end. I turned so quickly that I tripped over my own leg, almost falling. But there was nothing there. Just the long corridor lit by the hum of the lamps. I looked at the camera mounted on the ceiling, pointed directly at me, and at that moment I felt something far worse than fear. I was absolutely certain that when I went to review that recording, I would show up alone. And the breath I felt, it would never have been there. I should have quit that night, that I should have left, abandoned everything, accepted that that woman, or what appeared to be a woman, didn't want to be found, but curiosity, fear, doubt, it all mingled inside me like a slow poison. I needed to know. I needed to see it again. I needed to prove I wasn't going crazy. That's why I decided to go back to the toy aisle at exactly 3 in the morning. The digital clock near the storage room showed 3:00 with a short, almost muffled beep, as if even the machine didn't want to announce that time. That I took a deep breath, my hands sweating so much I could barely hold the scanner. Each step I took toward the hallway made the floor echo in a strange way, hollower, deeper. And when I turned toward the doll section, there she was. Stop. Exactly as described in the reports, with his back to me, body rigid, arms at his sides, head slightly tilted towards the shelf. As if she were admiring the dolls. My heart started pounding so loudly it felt like it was pulsing in my ears. The air became heavy, difficult to breathe, as if the entire store were trapped in a bubble. Hey, sorry, do you need help? My voice came out trembling, almost a plea. That's when she reacted. He didn't turn his body. He didn't move his arms. But the head moved in a way that didn't seem human, as if it were being pulled by invisible threads. And then I heard it. A whisper. Low, muffled, coming from somewhere very close, but not from her lips. It was as if the voice was forming in the air, not in the body. You shouldn't be here. I felt my stomach sink. The voice was feminine, but drawn out, as if there were torn passages of silence between the words. Who are you? My throat burned. The woman remained motionless. The dolls around her seemed to tilt slightly, as if the entire hallway were bending down to listen to her. The smell changed. An old, overly stored smell wafted in. Mold, damp wood, cheap perfume from decades ago. My eyes began to tear up. I took a step back, and in that movement I heard something I'll never forget. Children's laughter. Low, but coming from various different places in the hallway, as if the dolls were responding to something. The woman moved her head again at an impossible angle. My whole body shivered. I mustered my courage, or desperation, and stepped forward to try and touch her, to prove that she was real, that there was an explanation for it. But before my fingers got any closer, she simply had disappeared. He didn't run. He didn't turn around. He didn't move. 1 second she was there. Next there was absolutely nothing. I fell to my knees, panting, feeling like my heart was going to explode. I ran to the surveillance room, trembling so much that I could barely type the password. I checked the cameras. I rewound the video. I went through it frame by frame. And as I had feared, I was alone in the hallway, talking to no one. Staring into the void, raising his hand as if touching the air. Marcos put his hand on my shoulder and asked, "Dude, why are you talking to nothing?" I almost threw up right there, because what the camera showed wasn't what I experienced. And when I pressed pause and looked at myself on the screen, I felt a deadly chill run up my spine. In the reflection of one of the shop windows behind me, for a millisecond, there was a silhouette. Property, observing. After that night, I could no longer walk down the hallways the way I used to. Everything seemed different, distant, wrong. Walmart, which was already too quiet in the early morning hours, turned into a living labyrinth, made of shadows that seemed to move when I blinked, and aisles that echoed as if someone was always one step behind. I tried to avoid the toy section. I swear I tried. But the problem is that it didn't stay there. It was in the electronics area that I saw the first silhouette. A dark shape, standing between the TVs, reflected on multiple screens as if it were in several places at once. When I turned to look at it, nothing. Only the television showed my own face, pale, tense, breathing too fast. I went to the clothing store, another shadow. Property near the women's section. And the second my pupils adjusted to the light, she disappeared, as if she had never occupied any space at all. My whole body reacted as if I were being followed. The air behind me always felt colder. The sound of my own footsteps seemed to have another accompanying rhythm, very light, like the rustling of fabric on the floor. When I returned to the play area, against all my will, I noticed something that made my throat tighten. The dolls were facing me, all as if someone had walked past them, one by one, turning their plastic heads so they could watch me enter. I swallowed hard that I took 2 steps back. That's when the first toy activated on its own. A metallic, high-pitched childlike laugh echoing from somewhere at the end of the hallway. Then another one. And another. It was as if I had crossed an invisible border and awakened something that was waiting for me. Please, 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 I whispered without realizing I was speaking aloud. The light above me flickered, and for a second she was there, at a distance impossible to ignore. Stop at the end of the corridor. Rigid, his head was tilted to the side as if he were studying my reaction. I felt my body react before my mind. Trembling hands, shortness of breath, cold sweat running down my back. I wanted to run. I wanted to scream. But I couldn't. Because when I turned around to run away, the door that leads to the storage room locked herself. The sound of the latch clicking echoed so loudly that it made my legs give way. I tried turning the doorknob, pulling, pushing. Nothing. It was as if a force from the other side held the door shut with cruel calm. Behind me in the hallway, the doll's laughter suddenly stopped. Everything went silent, absolutely silent, until I felt it. One hand, ice cold, inert, touching my shoulder, with the gentleness of someone who just wants to confirm that you're really there. My heart almost stopped. I turned slowly, every inch of the movement aching, as if my body were resisting the truth. And for a moment, just a moment, I saw her face. But not a complete face, only fragments, shadows where there should be eyes. A smile that looked like it was drawn by someone who had never seen a human up close. Something it imitated, not something it belonged to. And when my feet finally responded, when my whole body reacted with pure panic, she disappeared, like always. As if he had never touched me before. I stood there, leaning against the locked door, breathing as if I'd run for miles. And the worst part? The door unlocked itself without anyone touching it. As if she had let me, or as if it were guiding me. I thought about never coming back. But the problem with working alone in the early hours of the morning is that nobody covers your shift. And I needed the money. I needed to survive. Even though the store was trying to warn me, or kick me out, every night I set foot in there. On my last night, something felt different from the very beginning. It wasn't just the silence. It felt like the whole store was waiting. The lights seemed dimmer. The air conditioning was off, but the air was still cold, and each corridor I passed echoed the sound of my footsteps with a strange delay, as if someone were walking right behind me, but slightly out of rhythm. When the clock struck 3 o'clock, I felt my body stiffen. The system's short beep echoed like a funeral alarm. I knew where I needed to look. I knew where she would be. Even so, every fiber of my body wanted to run in the opposite direction. But I went. The toy section seemed even longer, as if the aisle had been stretched out. The dolls were all too neatly arranged, perfectly aligned, as if someone had spent hours preparing that scene. That's when I saw her, not at the end of the hallway, not near the dolls, but halfway between me and the exit. As if he had foreseen exactly where I would try to escape. She had her back turned, but this time, something about her seemed different. The posture was more contorted, his arms were too stiff, his neck was bent at an angle that made me feel like throwing up. "What do you want from me?" I whispered, breathless. The silence went on for so long that I began to think she wouldn't answer. But then, the entire hallway breathed. The dolls emitted a dry crackling sound all at the same time, like plastic being stretched. A wave of cold air swept across my legs, and the woman moved her head. Slowly, very slowly, but not like a human being, like something imitating a movement it doesn't understand. The voice came later, not from the lips, not from the body. It came from the shelves, from the boxes. About the dolls. You, multiple voices whispered at the same time, all different, all wrong. Saw me? I stumbled backward, but bumping into the shelf caused some dolls to fall. They hit the ground without making any sound. No plastic, no impact. As if they were empty. The woman took a step. The first real movement I saw. A dry step. The sound of bones creaking like old wood splitting. She wasn't walking, she triangulava, as if it were broken into pieces and moved by invisible threads. I turned around and ran. I ran until my legs burned, until my throat stung, until the air felt like a sharp cut inside my chest. And the worst part? I couldn't hear her footsteps behind me, but I felt it. As if she were always a corridor next door, following along, waiting for the exact moment to reappear. I arrived at the warehouse, pushed the door open, and locked myself inside. I cried uncontrollably. I breathed as if I were drowning. And then, no door metal. 3 taps. Lightweight. Delicate. As if she were knocking to be invited in. After that, I don't know how much time passed. All I know is that, when the sun began to rise, I dropped my badge on the ground and left without looking back. I resigned that morning. I moved to another city a week later. I still wake up in the middle of the night thinking she's standing in the corner of the room, with her back to me. And yesterday, last night, I saw a post in the store's internal group. A new employee. He said that at 3 in the morning, he saw a woman standing between the dolls. Property, costs. As if he were replacing me. So, please, if you ever walk into an empty Walmart in the middle of the night, don't go to the toy section at 3 in the morning. Well, look, don't talk to her.